The Captain's Log Radio, with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, this is Captain Jonathan Moss, host of the Captain's Log TV, and host here of the Captain's Log Radio Show on the Outdoor Radio Network. Thanks for joining us today. And listen, I want to continue this conversation outside of the show via social media. So if you're on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe to the Captain's Log TV on all three, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Love to continue this conversation with you outside of the show on social media. So today, got a great show in store. Got one of my a killer dude, a good friend of mine, a guy who I like to pass on the highway at the randomest times ever, Mr. Captain Stephen Flook Jr. of Unashamed Adventures up in South Carolina. Dude, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
I'm great, man. Thanks so much for having me. It's going to be awesome.
One thing I love about Stephen is he is all about adventure. His charter service, even Unashamed Adventures. He loves adventure. And I was traveling earlier this year with my family. We were going to vacation in Panama City Beach. We had never been there before. And I'd reached out to Stephen just because he and I talk. In fact, we haven't talked in a little bit, but a lot of times we talk in the morning before our charters, even though we're in different states. Hey, man, have a good day. Praying for you. Hope you crush it. And so we reached out to him. I was like, bro, you're coming home from a tournament. Are you going to be on I-10 today? He's like, yeah, I'm going to be on I-10 today. I'm going to be on I-10 today. We're going to look for each other. And sure enough, bro, we passed each other and we waved, and it was hilarious.
You can't beat the John boat.
No, you can't. And you can't miss the John. Yeah, I love that thing. Tell us about your guide service. Where are you guiding full time?
Yeah, man. So we're up here in McClellanville, South Carolina. We're a hair north of Charleston, so 30, 40 minutes away from Charleston. Charleston, South Carolina is a pretty historical, beautiful place. The marsh up here is vast. From Isle of Palms all the way up to here, we got the Cape Romaine Wildlife Refuge. So we have 66,000 acres of marsh, refuge area to fish. And then we also have the Santee Coastal Reserve on the Santee River here, and I love fishing this entire area. So we actually live here in McClellanville and fish right, the boat ramp's 7-8 minutes away. And we're out here just hustling. It's beautiful as you've experienced. It's really pretty out here.
We filmed an episode together back in March, and even for March, it was chilly. This Florida boy was showing off his roots by, man, I had 19 different layers on, a hoodie, a beanie. I think I forgot something that morning. I think I texted you. I was like, bro, I'm going to stop and get some coffee. If you could bring me an extra buff. I think that's what it was. I forgot a buff. It was, listen, when you're going fishing, especially when it's cold, I don't want to fish that first day of the cold front. I don't want to get out there when it's ripping. But as full-time guides, sometimes you have to just make do. And this is your only day to fish, we're going fishing. When we're filming, if it's our only day to get out on the water and film the show, hey, a little wind isn't going to stop us. A cold front isn't going to stop us. And we went, we named the episode Full Send. We had to go full send. Yeah. And we hammered down on that John yacht, baby, and we took off, man. We went fishing.
We ran all over, we definitely covered water and, full confidence. We both had some artificials in our hand that we both believed in. Yeah. White 3-inch paddle tail always will get the job done. Sometimes when you got super windy, cold fronts, I think covering water with an artificial is always an effective tool. Just get that bait in the water as many times as you can. Just cast. Eventually, you're going to hit a fish on the head. And if he doesn't bite, you'll eventually hit another fish on the head. And eventually, one of them's going to bite. So,
and you know what? On that particular episode, we only used a handful of baits. We only used live bait. One particular spot, I think you caught a redfish on a shrimp, live shrimp. But we caught 4 species on this particular episode. We started our day catching largemouth bass, which is something I grew up doing. So I had a lot of confidence in that. I knew that was, you say, there's bass here. Oh, we're going to catch bass. That's and that was like 5 minutes. That was quick. Like, hey, man, we're going to stop real quick, a little pit stop. And we're going to catch a bass. I'm like, okay, that's cool. I don't get to catch bass and redfish in the same area ever. Now, if you get down to the Everglades and you kind of work your way up, that can, where the water's a little more brackish, that's more doable. But here in East Central Florida, where I'm guiding, that's just not something that happens. We left there, and then we were on the hunt for redfish, and we found them. And we had to work. We covered some water. And you're like, I've never fished here before, but we're going to do it anyways because it looks good. I'm like, yep. And we were protected from the wind. It was one of those, we had to make adjustments on the fly, and you doing tournaments and fishing all over the Southeast. Making adjustments on the fly is a big part of tournaments, especially when you're fishing in an area you've never fished before. And
with charters, even now with charters, like if I'm looking around, I'll look at somewhere and it looks good and it feels good. And I'm like, I haven't really caught fish there before, but it just feels right today. I'll still go try it. I'll just swing over there. I might only spend 10 minutes, but sometimes it produces. Like this past week, I found a new redfish school in an area that I've been driving by for 3.5 years. And they're right there and they're beautiful fish. Slot, upper slot, over slot, like beautiful, picture redfish. Fight hard, just a big wad of them right there. And I'm like, are you serious? I've been driving by this. And so that's one of those instances where you never.
So what made you stop?
I think I saw bait, or I decided to go in or just fish a little farther than I normally do. Because I've been fishing some trout on this point, and I was like, all right, let's just work this whole edge. So we kept going. Bam, redfish. Bam, another redfish. I'm like, all right. So then I let it rest a few days. I go back, and then I go in at a different tide. And I went in at low tide, and there was like a pile of them in there. I'm like, oh, okay. Anyway.
When you spend time on the water, as much time on the water as you and I do, full-time guides, that's a big part of hiring a full-time guide, is you start seeing patterns in certain places, and then you can replicate those same patterns in other areas. Even 100%. When I'm traveling, when we're filming the show, we're traveling in South Carolina to Tennessee to Texas to Louisiana. There's things that I've picked up. Hey, this works here. Oh, this is similar here. Oh man, I bet you there's gonna be fish there just simply because it reminds me of another place. And a lot of 100%. Times when you start seeing those same patterns, and then there's life there, there's bait there, there's going to be fish. There's going to be fish.
I mean, it's like points. My client today, we're talking about bass fishing because he fishes a couple lakes that I've used to fish. And I was like, dude, points. Like you can hit all these points. And then, as you know, a point, no matter what species it is, whether it's a point coming off of a shipwreck offshore, or a hump in a lake that's a point, or a grass point, or a mangrove point, etc. Like, it doesn't matter what species. Like, you can find points on Google Earth on your phone before you even show up and go fish, hit mark. And just like when we fish in Steenhatchee, Florida, or Louisiana for these tournaments that we did, the Power Pole Tour, like, I did all this scouting on my phone, on Google Earth, put a bunch of pins, show up, and you eliminate so much water. And most of the time, you're probably at least, 60% of the time I caught fish in all these spots I've never even been to. So, like, replicating a point, a point's an ambush spot, So, absolutely. Like, fish need an ambush spot. So, yeah, it's so replicable. And once you catch one species, especially bass, the bass guys. If you get a bass guy on the boat, I know it's going to be a good day because those boys can fish.
They're like me, man. They set the hook. We're going to set the hook. They're going to set the hook. And I set the hook on a fish today, and it was a smaller trout, and that thing went flying. I felt bad. I was like, bro, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But it's how my daddy raised me. You're gonna set the hook, dude. I tell people all the time, look, that fish right there is talking bad about your mama, and you got to hit that fish in the face. I mean, you got to punch him hard. You're gonna go fishing. The point isn't just to get the bite and go, oh, that's cool. I got a bite. No, the point is you want to get that fish in the boat, you know? So, but we had a great episode, man. We caught 4 species: largemouth bass, redfish, trout, and the surprise of the day, man, we got to this one spot and we were just wrecking the redfish. I mean, doubles and I hooked up, and then you missed one, and then you hooked up, and I missed one. It's like, I'm gonna throw it right back. And then I got hit, and I was like, bro, this is not red. This is a redfish. This is a bigger redfish. Yeah. Everyone we were catching was like cookie cutter, like the same size. This one, and we had been joking around. You know, we have a friend, a mutual friend, Mr. Dave Flad, Release Over 20. He's the founder of Release Over 20. Release Over 20 is a great organization. It just encourages anglers to release trout and now flounder and a few other species. Release those fish over 20. It's super important. Those fish are your breeder fish. But he's developed this margarita slam. Dave Flad with the margarita slam. It's redfish, trout, flounder, striped bass, largemouth bass. And we had caught 3 of the species, and when that fish hooked on, I thought, man, I had a big fish. But we were joking about catching a striper that day. And that's what it was. It was a striper. Caught a striper. Wasn't expecting that, man. But very cool episode. A lot of fun. Full Set is the name of the episode, and we had to give it, man. We had to go after it. And I love those days. It can be a grind. It can be tough, especially when you have a client. But I like working hard. And some days I don't need it to be hard, man. Sometimes it's like, okay, I need to be easy because this angler is brand new to fishing, or they don't have a lot of experience, and I want it to be easy. But sometimes it's like, I want it to be worth it. Let's go after them.
100%.
Let's push as hard as we can and see what happens. But when we get back, we're going to talk more about what makes a bait a confidence bait and different scenarios that you can use that bait in.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio Show. I'm your host, Captain Jonathan Moss, and with me today, a good friend of mine, Captain Flook Jr., and we were talking about fishing inshore, and right before the break, we were talking specifically about a confidence bait. You know, a confidence bait is a lure that you use often, and you have confidence in it because you catch fish with it. And when we were filming that day on our episode Full Send of the Captain's Log, we were in this backcountry creek. We're in this little creek system. We were tucked in there because the wind was blowing, and fishing the outside was going to be really difficult. So you took us into this creek where we could get some protection from the wind. And we were about to go into another little feeder creek or finger creek, whatever you want to call it. And it looked too good. I didn't want to go in there without casting. That point, we were talking about points a second ago.
Yeah.
That point had water flowing past it. It looked too good to not cast a bait there before we went in there. And sure enough, you said, hey man, pick this rod up. Use your confidence bait. Grab that 3-inch paddle tail. My preference is a DOA, and it was white, but I used a range of colors. But here's a white paddle tail. Skip that thing in there. Fish with this today. Like, fish with this right now. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to fish it right in that corner before we go in there. And I made a cast, and boom, it didn't take 2 seconds for that redfish to come, that redfish right there to come up there to smoke that bait. There's something about it. And I don't know, obviously the fish, I mean, fish are smart, but they don't know when you're having a good day or a bad day.
Hmm.
They see the bait and they see the way it's being worked. And I
Yep.
think when it's your confidence bait, is you've learned, it's become your confidence bait because you've learned how to use that bait. You know, you catch fish with it
Hmm.
so much that now you're replicating those patterns. You're replicating that retrieval, the way you're twitching the bait, or the way you're how fast you're spinning the handle on your reel, speed at which that lure is coming back to you. You've figured all that out, and now it's habit,
Yeah.
muscle memory.
Yep.
What do you think? You think that's what
Well,
it's about?
I, when you grab a bait and you believe in it, and very often I'll hand a client a rod, and you can tell they don't know, they don't quite believe in that, and I'll throw it out and I'll catch a fish on it, and like, hey, look, this works. And they kind of start believing in it, and then they start working it a little bit different, and then they start catching more fish on it. All that builds up, and you know, not to sound a little crazy, but I think fish can feel whether you believe in a bait or not through your rod. I think they can feel that positive or negative energy coming through your rod through the lines of that bait. Because if you don't believe in something, you're just you're kind of casting it out, working it. You may not be subconsciously, you may not even be casting it great. You may not even be hitting like right on the grass edge or casting past the point to bring it across the point. You may not be doing that stuff because you don't even believe in the bait. So when you get a bait, like for you, it's that white paddle tail, a little light flickered in your eye when I handed you. I
Oh,
could see the sparkle.
I know this. This is home. This is home, baby. I know how to use this lure.
Exactly. And so, like a fake shrimp in a cork, whatever. Around here, you grab one of those, you're going to go catch a fish on it. That's just the bottom line, or a paddle tip, whatever. And, for you, you've caught who knows how many species you've caught on that bait. Same for me, like a 3-inch paddle tail, any color. For me, it's gold. Dude, I've hooked 100-pound tarpon on the beach, snook,
Yeah.
redfish, trout, bass, just like you. You got the same story probably. Like, probably a 3-inch paddle tail. You hand me that bait anywhere across the world. I think if that was the only bait I could ever pick, if I had to pick one, it would be that.
Well,
What
think
about
about
you?
it. Think about that 3-inch paddle tail.
Yeah.
Okay. You can drag that bait on the bottom to make
Yep.
it look like a crab. You can twitch that bait to make it look like a shrimp. You can swim that bait back to look like a shad if you're freshwater fishing.
Yep.
Or like a mullet, a fingerling mullet, or a pinfish. There's so many different ways you can fish that bait. It's a dummy bait also. You have a client who's brand new to fishing and
Yep.
they don't know how to work baits. Cast it, straight retrieve.
Yep.
Turn a handle, keep it moving. Let that tail wiggle back and forth, put out a
Yep.
vibration. Do all the work for you. If it's real shiny, real bright out, you can get one with some glitter. So now you're going to get the reflection on the bait, looking like a bait fish, plus the wiggling of the tail. So they're going to see it, they're going to feel it, they're going to hear it. It's going to hit all of their senses, and it's going to trigger that bite. It's going to create a reactionary bite. Paddle tails do great. I love paddle tail. It's probably the number one lure fish catching bait for clients on my boat.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Number 2 after that would be Rapala jerk bait. I thought I had one beside me. Number 8 Rapala jerk bait. I've caught, same deal. It looks just like what these fish are chasing and eating.
Yeah.
But having the confidence in a bait makes all the difference in the world. All the difference.
100%. Like if someone's going to fish new water, people ask me all the time, hey man, what bait should I throw? Hey, what's working right now? I'm sure you get those questions at the ramp, on social media, whatever. People are always looking to know, like, what's a secret bait? Well, there's not a secret bait. It's a 3-inch paddle tail. But, you don't need a bunch of stuff. Get 2 or 3 different baits and maybe 1 or 2 colors, and that's it. Keep it simple. And just grab that bait, and all right, let's say you have a fake shrimp and you have a 3-inch paddle tail. I'm willing to bet saltwater in the saltwater world, inshore, that's going to work. One of those is going to work that day. And
Absolutely.
if you fish it right and fish it around good areas, eventually you're going to catch fish on it. And, you know, especially as we go into fall now, with the water temps dropping and, you know, everything's, all the fish are coming up from the deep from the summer, you know, coming up shallow. Like, those are the baits that we're throwing right now, especially a fake shrimp under a cork.
Have you guys started having cold fronts yet? Are you experiencing fall yet where you're at?
We're getting there. It seems like it's been a little delayed this year, but like we got a good strong northeast past couple days, a northeast wind, you know, coming out of the north. So the water's cooling. We're at 75-degree water temps today, which is, as you can see, I'm smiling. It's so fun because all the trout, all of our speckled trout, you know, in the summer they're pretty deep. Generally now they're getting up on the grass, you know, up shallow, you know, in 3 to 6 feet of water. So we're just
they're
fishing.
Happy. Think about when you're coming out of summer and that water's hot, right? There's less dissolved oxygen in hot water. Now you start getting these first couple of cold fronts, man, that water temperature's dropping. There's more dissolved oxygen in that water, the oxygen that fish need to breathe. They're not out of breath. You know, you're running around on the heat. It's hot. You're going to get out of breath fast. When it's cooler out, man, these fish are happy. They're going to get a little bit more frisky. They're going to get a little bit more aggressive. So, it makes a huge difference. We haven't had that down here yet. It's still 100 degrees outside. Now, we've had a lot of rain recently, so our water temps have come down some. Mid-80s. From being up in the mid-upper 90s over the summer, which is just a scorcher for water temperature.
That's hot.
But once we start getting, we're entering, this is my favorite, the next 3-4 months are my favorite time to fish. Because the water temperatures cool down, the fish are excited, the fish are happy, there's plenty of oxygen for them to breathe, and then they just get aggressive. And then as soon as it's like middle of January, then you start getting those cold fronts and a lot of wind, and then it kind of changes. And so it's a couple months of really tougher fishing. And then March happens, it feels like fall again because it's not as cold, not as much wind, and those fish get super happy again. But we're entering into a time of year, fall can be just absolutely incredible. Now here we get, we have our mullet run. And then as it cools off and our mullet disappear, a lot of shrimp on the flats. Are you seeing that? I know you guys cast net shrimp like easy peasy up there. Is that something you guys have year round, or is that a time of year deal?
You know, kind of year round. But I'm normally throwing shrimp. Like right now, that's all we're throwing. I have, out of the 8 rods on the boat, I think 6 of them have a fake shrimp under a popping cork right now.
Oh, love that.
Yeah. It's just, we're casting it up in the flooded Spartina grass and just popping it, you know, on its way out. We'll give it a 5-second pause. So, you know, let that fake shrimp flutter down. And that's when those speckled trout and reds will hit it.
Absolutely.
But, you know, a couple different ways we'll work that too is like, we'll cast it in the grass, let it sit for a little while, and then rip it out real fast and let it sit again. Or you can just rip it, you know, pop, 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 and then let it sit. Just thinking about the fake shrimp, you know, think about whenever you're throwing an artificial lure, think about whatever bait you're imitating. So if I have a fake shrimp, a couple quick twitches and then a pause to let that bait fall back down, that's what a shrimp does when it's getting chased.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But go ahead.
I would say if you don't know how a fish acts in the wild, go to a bait shop and get a live shrimp. And you will see, go in the tank, look at the tank, stick a net in the tank and watch them swim. They swim backwards. If you're using a popping cork, that pop creates a clicking sound. That's the cork on the surface sliding back and forth. Very similar to a shrimp when it is escaping. clicks its body, its tail to its body, and it makes that click click sound. So when you're using a popping cork, the fish hear that sound, and then that bait is going shooting through the water column.
Yeah.
And then you give it that 5-second pause, and that bait's going to drop back down. Whoop,
Yeah.
up and down, up and down. But it's crucial to give it that pause, and they hit it. A lot of times when you pause it, they're hitting it on the fall. Did you experience that?
Oh yeah. Well, and now that the water temps are dropping, all the redfish and the trout, like we've had redfish this past week crushing the popping cork.
Love that.
And we're not in Louisiana; we're in South Carolina. And
when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation with Captain Stephen Flook Jr. right here on the Captain's Log Radio.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio right here on the Outdoor Radio Network. I'm your host, Captain Jonathan Moss, and let's talk a little bit about gear. On this Gear Talk segment, listen, I love tools. I grew up using tools, and I get it from my dad. My dad is a tool junkie. And he always told me two things. Number one, buy the best quality tool that you can afford. Buy once, cry once. It's going to last you longer. And number two, take care of your tools and they'll take care of you. So I'm all about buying quality and then taking care of my stuff. Because if you made the investment, don't beat it up. Don't trash it. Take care of it. Use it. But then take care of it. Danco pliers. Danco is known for they make so many tools. I am a huge fan of the Danco Premio pliers. They're made out of titanium. I don't go fishing without my Danco Premio pliers. But Danco just came out with this brand new series called the Lunar One. From fillet knives, 6. I've got so many different versions here. A 6, a 7, a 9-inch fillet knife, fish grippers, scissors, pliers. These products are made out of a Swedish stainless steel blade. The knives come with a custom sheath. Listen, Danco. They're going to stand behind their products. They come with a warranty. And this new Lunar series doesn't break the bank. Now, again, buy the best you can afford and take care of your tools, and they'll go a long ways. One of my favorite pieces of equipment are the scissors. I use these braid scissors all the time. I've got a pair in my truck. I got a pair here in my fly tying desk. I got a pair in my rigging station in my shop. These things are awesome. So if you're into tools like me, go check out Danco pliers and all of their fishing tools and accessories. Steven, do you like tools? Do you like fishing pliers? Do you like
Absolutely.
that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah.
We couldn't do our job without having these tools and these products on the boat. So that's our gear talk for this week. Listen, before the break, we were talking about fall fishing. We were talking about popping corks. Now, what I love about a popping cork, and it's not a real popular bait here in Florida, but what it gets me, man, it gets me in the feels. When I was a kid, my dad would take me fishing. Started out fishing with a little float. We call them floats. Some people call them bobbers. Some people call them a cork. We call them floats. With a little hook and a piece of white bread, and some, or maybe sometimes we'd get some. We stop. You know why we stopped using bread? Because I would eat the bread between catching fish. We'd be 3 years old, fishing with my dad, and he'd be like, "Dude, don't eat the bread, bro. Like that's for the fish." I'm like, "Well, it's good."
So did you use like the end of the loaf piece or the middle loaf pieces?
Oh, the middle's the best. If you got to get that the white, the good white. We had a bread factory not far from here, Merida Bread Factory, and man, you knew when they were cooking that bread. You could smell. The wind was blowing. It smelled so good. So we stopped using that. We were using earthworms. But the point being, that float went under. You had a fish. You had a bite. So when we're using a popping cork, pop that bait, you give it that 5-second pause for that shrimp to sink back down, and then that thing gets eaten and it goes down. And it's like being a kid again, man.
Yeah.
I love seeing
So
that.
much fun.
But it's not a real popular bait here in Florida. But in the Carolinas and Louisiana and Texas, you see that used a whole lot.
Well, dirty water, it works so good. So even if you're in Florida, inshore fishing, and you've got like some dirty water conditions, I'd be willing to bet it'll probably work. Just because you got sound, then you got a bait underneath it. You can put a little rattle in your bait, put some extra scent on there. So you've got all kind of things working in your favor. And you can cover water really effective with it.
Yeah.
So like my favorite lures to cover water, like I love a top water, a walk the dog lure that you can walk the dog. I love top water. I don't know anyone that doesn't love top water. And especially in the fall fishing, if we get a good overcast day, dude, you could throw top water all day long and catch big redfish, I actually just caught my PB top water redfish a week or two ago. It was a 37-inch 30-pounder on top water.
Heck yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it was epic.
Listen, if you're not familiar with redfish,
okay,
the way a redfish is designed, their mouth is on the bottom side of their face. Okay. So for a redfish to eat a topwater plug, he's got, especially one that big, a 36-inch fish, it's got to get its whole head out of the water to get its mouth around that plug. So they miss a lot when it's on top.
Yeah.
But when that happens, especially a fish of that size, that's explosive, dude. That's awesome.
Any redfish on top water is, because normally they miss it a lot. So you'll get 3 or 4 eats before you even hook the fish. So like they'll hunt it. A lot of times you'll see them waking on it behind it. And so you just got to keep twitching, twitch. My biggest thing for the redfish on top water, though, is you don't want to go too fast. I have found a nice, slow, steady retrieve is best for redfish. And now the trout, you can rip it a little faster and then pause. You can do a couple different things with trout. But the redfish, if you've got one chasing it specifically, if you see that fish or he misses it, just keep going nice and steady. Yep. And then eventually, dude, sometimes they'll hit it right by the boat. I'm sure you've seen that happen. Like, don't quit throwing that top. Don't quit working that bait till it's at the boat. Work it all the way back to the boat because you never know.
Today, I had one of my regular clients today on the boat. His name is Jeff, and he loves, I'm going to rag on him a little bit. He loves throwing top water.
Yeah.
I think today was our 4th or 5th trip together, and he has lost, I don't care, he's gonna laugh at this, he has lost a topwater plug on every single trip.
Oh no.
And I didn't think about it today, and he brought it. He's like, man, I've lost a topwater plug on every trip. I was like, actually, yeah. So today, though, where we were fishing, there was a bunch of rocks, and he threw it in the rocks, and it was dark. There was just a little bit of light. You couldn't see. So he chucked that thing out there. Fish were blowing up, and he hit the rocks. And I was like, well, I'm not going over there. The school of fish is right there. I'm not going to go get it. So we were leaving that spot. He goes, oh, man, topwater. I was like, oh, yeah, thank you. We'll go back. I literally pulled this thing out of the box this morning. It was brand new. I think he made like 2 casts with it. I went over there and I couldn't find it. I was like, well, I'm not going to spend an hour looking for this topwater plug. I'll come back. I'll be on the water tomorrow, actually. Scout, and so I'll run over there and find it. But yeah, love topwater. Seeing that explosion on the surface, it doesn't.
There's nothing better.
Better. And sometimes the fish will hit it so hard that they miss and they knock it out of the water. But absolutely love it. Going back to the popping cork, talking about fall fishing. if you have an angler who's new at fishing,
Mm-hmm.
and you know an area that's holding a good group of trout, like it didn't have to be big trout, just a
Yeah.
big number of trout, and you throw that popping cork in there, you can really get take a kid,
Yeah.
and you can really get them hooked on fishing and excited about fishing, and it's really easy with a popping cork.
100%.
When that float goes under, man, you know what's going on, and there's no denying what's happening. And sometimes we've caught here giant sail cats.
Oh my goodness.
We'll be on a school of like 15 to 20 inch trout. We're wrecking the trout. And all of a sudden, all that commotion brings over other fish. You'll get like a 10 or 12 pound sail cat, and you got like a 9-year-old kid who's like, man, I don't know what to do. He's the drag is screaming, the kid is screaming, the dad's looking at me, he's grinning ear to ear, high-fiving. Like, you want to get someone hooked on fishing, man. That popping cork can be a tremendous.
Absolutely.
But no, you said it, as these fronts come in and you have these overcast days, there's so many different things that you can do in fall. I love this time of year. We start getting these cold fronts coming in. The water temperatures begin to drop, and the fishing changes. Here in Central Florida, I mean, it's October, but it's still hot outside. I'm so ready for that first front to come through. There's so much we're coming out of summertime, and the water temperatures have been, mid 90s. So you have a lower amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. As soon as that water starts cooling off, you start getting more dissolved oxygen. These fish come alive. They get aggressive. 40, 50, 60 fish days are really easy. Yeah. Because you find those schools, and now they're willing to eat. And when 100%. They bunch up in the fall, now they're going to become competitive with each other. It can be just an incredible time of the year to go fishing.
Yeah. Good fishing, man. And each cold front that comes in, it's only going to get better. So, especially when the water, when it goes from the 80s down to the 70s, and then from the 70s to the 60s, those are like the best jumps. So as soon as when you look at the weather forecast and you've got some like 50s at night, I know that the next, 5 days of fishing is going to be really, really, really good. And another thing too, this will, help some people. When you look at a forecast, the first 2 days of the cold front is normally when I'm going to catch the most trout. And then once that water kind of stabilizes, the water temperature, the second 2 days, or I guess day 3, day 4 is when I'll do really good with redfish. Do you find that similar down there?
Here's what I know with the cold fronts and the redfish, and here's why.
Yeah.
Trout are more tolerant to colder water than the redfish. So I think the redfish are going, okay, hold on. Yeah. I'm freaking out here. I need to just kind of hold my spot and wait and feel that barometric pressure change as that front pushes through. Whereas the trout are like, yeah, baby, let's eat. Like, I'm good. I'm good to go. Well, we're coming up on a hard break. When we come back, more with Captain Stephen Flook Jr. here on the Captain's Log Radio.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio Show. Captain Jonathan Moss, and with me today is Captain Stephen Flook Jr. It's been a great show with you today, dude. So excited to have had you here. We got this last segment. We have done a lot of things together. A lot of fishing. We fished here in Central Florida. We fished up in South Carolina together. We've run across each other randomly on the highway. Something else we've shared in common, we share a few things in common, is our adventures overseas.
Yeah.
I know you've done some crazy stuff overseas doing mission work, and I've done the same thing with my church. Tell me a little bit about some of these adventures you've done, man.
Man, well, my parents did missions overseas as a kid. So I lived overseas in Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, and Bolivia, in South America. So when I was a kid, so from 8 to 18, lived abroad and speak Spanish and all that. But some of the, Bolivia, South America was probably my favorite. Because we'd go way out in the jungle, 70 miles one way down a dirt road,
Wow.
to go hang out in the villages out in the jungle. So like it was fun. No power out there.
Did you get to fish while you were there?
Yeah, a little fishing. We
What
caught
were you catching?
a lot of catfish down there.
Okay.
They called them muturo.
Ooh.
I'll have to send you a picture of one.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty big. They're pretty cool. Then we have pacu, which I think are actually in South Florida now.
Yeah, I got a buddy who caught one.
Yeah.
That sucker was giant, bro. Like some retention pond at an apartment complex or something.
Yeah.
Very
So
cool.
they had those down there, and then Dorado, not the Dorado that you're thinking, not a dolphin. It's kind of a golden. Yeah. They had those. So yeah, I've done some crazy stuff.
That's awesome, dude. I was in college. I got to travel. This is a fishing show, but we're on the